Hi, Edson. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Alice?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. Now we have nice weather, so it's nice.
I'm glad to be in touch for sure.
Thank you for agreeing to have that conversation with me. I know we're both passionate about that topic. I say that to all the people that I interview, but I'm passionate about a lot of things, but especially what we have in common, and the way we met and what we like in the work that we do. And so it's going to be a very exciting conversation. Before we start, I'm just gonna remind people that I do this interview for the Ready Plus project. Ready Plus project stands for Racial Equity, Accessibility, Diversity, and Inclusion Plus. Um, it's funded by the Canadian government to help redesign and adapt um, program and services so they are more accessible to all communities, especially historically underserved communities. So for our project, we try and develop an approach that helps program and services become um, more competent to serve all communities, especially historically underserved communities. But it's a very specific approach that's like really brand new and grounded into something that's practical, innovative. Also, there's a clinical aspect of it because we like to be what we call brain based, which is remind ourselves that we have a lot in common, especially the way our brain functions. So it's a pretty fun project, and I have the chance to have a conversation to just illustrate and have more in-depth information about specific things for communities. And one of those specific thing is what we want to talk about today, which is community engagement, but through a very specific lens. And so I'm going to explain it a little bit more, but the way I met you is definitely connected to that lens. I met you in a group for kids who wants to spend time in nature called Black in Nature. And this is a group for Black kids so they can enjoy being connected to nature together. And that common identity is the main reason why they're together and they're spending time together and just sharing that space. And this is what I'm interested in chatting with you about is really community engagement and understanding the need for a safe spaces, the need for community spaces, community-centered spaces. And the fact that there's a misunderstanding sometimes around this or just some misconception. I don't think people have a clear idea and understanding on what it means and when it's necessary. So I'm really excited to have that conversation with you. But first, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
My name's Edson. I'm really passionate about that subject, the way you mentioned as well, because I didn't ever experience a space like that until I was myself an adult, and I didn't know I needed it until I was in that space. So I'm trying to create spaces around the community for children that are like that. When we met, I was working with Black in Nature, which exactly that brings Black children together in nature, and that was a very specific group. I've worked with other not-for-profit organizations as well, like Black Ottawa Connect, which again, has a closed Facebook group. Is how it started, and just where Black people can connect with each other, ask questions that are not always understood outside of the community, right? And yeah, so that's what I do, and I work with Black Lives Collective right now that's trying to do similar things. So it's a lot. It's a big passion for me, and I'm trying to spread out in how we can make that happen.
And your passion is as real as it is infectious. So I think you mentioned something that's important. It's for people from the outside of the community. It might seem confusing or it's hard to understand because it's not your own experience. Sometimes when you witness something from outside, you're not sure. Um, and so it's always a struggle to try and explain like we are thriving for inclusion, we work for inclusion, and then we are asking for that non-inclusive space for us. And it looks like it's a double standard a little bit. How do you deal with that, that balance that needs to be found and the way you can explain it?
I guess the best way to explain it for me is just from microaggressions, because even as a Black man myself, I didn't understand microaggressions very well. And I saw a video, I don't know if you ever saw it, but about how, mosquitoes sometimes follow you and they sting you. And if you get stung by one mosquito, like if I go out in the summer, I get stung maybe once a day. I don't really get bothered by it. So those little mosquito bites aren't a big deal. But for my daughter, who goes outside with me and she gets stung maybe 20, 30 times per outside moment, and then the swelling happens and it's really big. So sometimes when she goes outside, she's a little bit panicked about having to get all those mosquito bites and she really freaks out. And the first time that I experienced that with someone else that wasn't my daughter, I was confused why they're freaking out about mosquitoes when to me it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. And so microaggressions are like that. If you're never microaggressed, you can't understand it. You can't understand why I won't let you touch my hair, because you've not been asked, to touch your hair 20 times that day. But for me, this might be the 21st person asking me to touch my hair, or those little comments that come with, oh, your hair feels like, this, or your hair feels like that. So it's just so draining to have to deal with those interactions. And I understand it, you understand it, but someone who's never been asked the things that we're asked to do or to accept or to tolerate won't understand it. So yeah, that's how to explain it. Like, it's hard to explain because you don't know what it's like to be us.
Sometimes you don't even know what you don't know.
Hmm.
That's the reality. But I like the fact that you mentioned that. That's a great analogy. I've never heard it, but yeah, it makes so much sense. And it also will not equal is to when we get stung, also how it affects us. Like there's so many layers to your illustration. I love it. And the example of the touching your hair, like I know that was a big thing in my house. Uh, because my kids, like half of my kids are Black and half of my kids are mixed race. So the hair texture is pretty much like we have all the hair type in my house usually. And so we are asked a lot about that, like touching our hair. And I remember the first time my eldest daughter was now 21, when she was around like maybe 8. She was confused as to because I was really upset when people asked that, and I was really like almost angry because I didn't like that's something that offends me personally. I know that other people are not as offended. I'm personally very offended, and my daughter was unsure. Like she didn't really understand because I've never taught her that the reasoning behind it. And so she asked me like, why was it a big deal when people ask like, why do you get so mad? And not even ask, like people don't ask. People want to touch my hair. Usually they don't ask. Like if they ask, it's different. They give you a choice. But most of the time they were just touching her hair. She has similar hair as mine. So they would touch her hair and I would really get mad. And she asked me like, why is it so upsetting for you? And I told her, would you touch someone else's hair without asking them? And she was like, no, I would never. And I told her, so why is it okay for people to touch your hair? And she was stuck for a second because she understood that I would never touch someone else's hair because it's rude. Because it's rude. Like you should not do that. It's somebody's like body. It's on them. Like it's weird. And then you realize that there's a lot of internalized um, discrimination and racism because you're like, I'm different. It's okay to do it to me. It's not okay for me to do it to other people, but it's okay to do it to me. And I think this is when I hear you when you say I didn't realize I needed that space until I got it. Because sometimes, I don't know if I need a space where people won't touch my hair until I understand that I deserve a space when someone is as respectful to me as I am to them.
And
It's
that's
it's
so easy. Like it's funny because as you said it, when you're in that space, you've all had the same shared experiences. So I would never do that to you. And what's weird
Mhm.
about the hair touching, and you mentioned the word racism, but I've never seen white people touch other white people's hair without permission. So like I'm okay with sometimes, cultural differences. Whereas if in white culture it was acceptable to touch people's hair, and I'm here and like it's a cultural thing. I get that, but they don't do it within their culture, so they really only do it to us. So they don't sting each other, they sting us, and then they're confused as to why we don't like it. Like do it to each other.
No, I think that is what is nice with this conversation. Like we're like, yeah, we get it. This is also like this is our safe space. This is the good illustration of what a safe space is. Because I can tell you the thing and you have something to reply, and we are just, in harmony in the way we see the world. So that's always nice. So thank you for for sharing that safe space with me. Um, because you're advocate for those spaces, like this is something you're proactively building. Do you get like what type of, like, I'm curious because we had that conversation, but is there a common reaction to people that feel that they are almost against this, or like they are uncomfortable with that idea? Like what kind of just, back and forth you have with people about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some conversations with the elders in our community where they felt like it wasn't a good idea because, as you said, it's almost like because especially the elders of a community who fought for inclusion, who fought to be included in things where we are now living this inclusion space because of their fight. It feels almost as though we're going against what they fought for, and it also feels as though now we're doing to the non-Black members of the community what was being done to the Black members of the community. So the elders, there was a lot of pushback and lacking of understanding. But the difference with us and them is that because they were pushed out, they were almost forced to have the safe space. They had that all the time because they couldn't get white jobs. They worked with other Black people. So they had the opportunity to have those safe spaces, or because they could only live in a certain neighborhood, they had those opportunities, or because they lived back home, because they grew up in a different country that's more Black, they had those spaces. So they don't understand the elders in our community, that need for us. And so I go to that, I go to telling them, about their own experiences where they were in a big white environment, and how that made them feel. And I just remind them that in our generation and our children's generation, because we're not being held down as much as we were before. So we're able to spread out. We're able to go to the same schools as white kids, right? Our students can, or our children can. We're able to work in a predominantly white area or space because we're entitled to those spaces now. So we're always surrounded by things that maybe the elder generation experienced less often, or less of them had experienced because of lack of opportunities to live in a white neighborhood, work in a white space, have your children go to a white school. So just explaining that to them, and reminding them of all that pressure from those few moments that they had and how much more of it we have now, it helps make them understand. But there's still some pushback from them, and at the end of the day, it's not their fight to fight. It's our truth and our moment and our reality.
For sure, they generations experience things differently for sure. And probably I think one of the things that I can see when, like, through what you're saying, it's also maybe they were more secure in their Blackness and their cultural, roots, uh, because they didn't have access to the space. Then they spend the majority of the time within community, and so they had that, and so for them it's part of the experience. When for you, because you had access to the space, you spend less time exposed and immersed in the community, and therefore you have less of an understanding, and you're less like forged by that community. So definitely a different experience. Before we continue, do you mind moving a little bit because there's a lot of light?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Is this
perfect.
better?
Yeah,
Okay.
better. It's a little oversaturated. um, yeah, so I think it's super interesting because, yeah, you mentioned elders. This is not even, I didn't think you would start with elders. I thought you would start with people who are outside of the community and don't really get like I thought you wanted inclusion. What is happening there? So, uh, thank you for sharing the vision from the
Yeah.
inside. But what about the outside of the community? Like, do you get some pushbacks, or do you don't even talk to people and you don't really care, or like what are
Both,
some of the?
because the reason I start with the elders is because that's who I speak to. That's who, when I was building the program, that's who I was getting guidance and experience from. So that's why that's the first pushback I got. Well, outside of the community, to be honest, because we haven't really been engaging with the outside world, there hasn't been a lot of pushback yet, but there have been a few parents who, have read through our entire description of what it is, what it's about, who've maybe heard about it from, a Black neighbor, Black family friend who's registering their kids. I've had my families try to register and email and say, hey, I'm not Black, but I want to come. And I asked them the simple question, do you identify as Black? And if the answer, or not do your children identify as Black? And the answer comes back, no, then I said, then unfortunately, and I explained it to them, in order to allow, this is the key words here, in order to allow Black children to be their full selves and to create a space that's welcoming of that, we cannot have your non-Black children participate, because that's all it is that, sorry. um, that's a hard one, but our poor kids, they go through so much time having to shelter themselves or put up walls and put up just shells with themselves, right? So it's so nice to see them in a space that is just allowing them to just be free. So sorry.
Oh, I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear you. I didn't share at the beginning more about my own story for sure, because people will listen to hopefully more interviews and will get a sense of who I am. But it's important for me to talk about this because, as you know, I have children who are Black, but also who have disabilities, who identify with different identities of gender. So the world is not a kind and welcoming place to them. Unfortunately, the majority of the time. And the fact that people don't understand what it means to not feel safe and to underestimate the impact on behaviors, on self-esteem, etc., and all the things that you struggle with when you don't feel represented in the space that you share with other people, or not feel safe in that space because your identity are not respected. I think it's more than a big deal. I think it's core to our lived experience. And I know that other part of the work that we do, it's advocacy, like intersectional advocacy, trying to explain to people, listen, if you don't understand people's identity and where they come from, you cannot support them properly. Like a Black kid who has behavioral issues, okay, there's different aspects of that situation, but what about the fact that they don't see themselves represented around them? So their environment is not friendly already, and then you throw other stuff on top of it, and you get what you get. So if you address just one aspect, you don't address everything, you're not going to solve any problem or any issue, or you're not going to improve the situation. So I hear you, I feel you, and I understand your passion and the importance of the work that you do.
Thank you. And you touched on something, just like I had not a funny story, but let's just say I was in teaching. There was a classroom of students that had gone through a lot of different things where they lost their French teacher, they lost their English teacher, their replacement French teacher had to go and leave the replacement, and so at this point, late in the year, me and another teacher stepped in to teach. I teach the French, he teaches the English, and we start around the same time. And there's so many behavioral issues, but mine go away quickly, and hers persist. And there's a teacher that's in there to support, that's there for both the French time and the English time, and she can't get over how different the behavior is in the morning when they're with me compared to the afternoon when they're with her. And I should have mentioned that this school is a predominantly Black school. And so this classroom has predominantly Black students. I don't do anything different per se than the white teacher, except that I look the part, so I look like a dad, an uncle, a brother, a cousin. I look like someone that could be family. But not only that, I look the part, But I understand cultural differences. I understand that if my student did something bad and I'm talking to him, he's going to avoid eye contact, because in a lot of Black cultures, when an elder speaks to you, you don't look, especially if you've done something bad,
Hmm. Yeah.
looking in the face is almost
Hmm.
disrespectful. So I don't ask them to look at me while I'm disciplining them. I don't discipline them in front of the class, because I know that that has also negative implications. I discipline them outside of the class. We chat one-on-one. I treat them with respect. And so, those little things that have nothing to do with, quote unquote, classroom management or rules or my practice, but
Hmm.
those kids now listen to me better, and they're more respectful. They're better able to learn. It's not that I'm a better teacher. If I was flipped into a white school, that teacher would have been able to resolve those behaviors faster than me, because she would have understood them culturally, and she would have
Hmm.
reminded them of something that's closer to home. So, these Black spaces we create for your children, for other children, right away, without doing anything, those children are just able to go,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And maybe they don't realize or know just the same way that you did that they need this space, but when they are in the space, something in them shifts and they can feel it and they get it. And then they seek it more and more. I can see that. I can see how it is. Like I don't have to notice if I'm different because I have a lot in common. And my dream is sometimes to have a space that looks even more like them, like with Black kids who are disabled, who have those similar identities, where they're like, I'm not alone, and it feels good. Like, and I can have someone that looks like me, but that I appreciate, that I respect, and then I can give myself that self love that I like sometimes. And you touch on something really like crucial to the conversation we're having, because we're talking about a safe space, and it's what it means to feel safe. Like where does that need come from? What does it mean? And I think, especially in school, because you mentioned school, but it's true with any system really, and anywhere you go where you have to experience like discrimination, microaggression, etc. People will think that safety means being protected from being harmed. It means that I'm safe from violence. I'm safe from those aggression. Like I need that space where it's not going to happen. But I think they miss also the part where you don't necessarily feel that safe if you're on your own, all alone. You're still sheltered and away from that arm, but you're still not as safe as in a space that you share with people, that you can have a connection with, because they forget the fact that there is, in safety, feeling safe has to do with how connected you are. The feeling like your nervous system feels more not calm but more regulated when you feel connected, even if sometimes you're because sometimes if you're away from aggression or violence, like your nervous system is not necessarily regulated, but the more you feel connected, the more you have a chance to regulate and to feel safe. So I think when you describe your students, what you have a bigger potential for safe connection, for familiarity. And there's not just in the safe space that you're trying to create in the community, it's not just, we want to be away from the risk. We want to be away from the risk. That's not just that. And I think that's what people see. It's not, no, we want a space where we're going to be nurtured and celebrated, because that's what also is going to make us feel safe.
I love that. I love that feeling that you're describing. And I love gathering in those spaces, because that's exactly the feeling that we get. And you can see it. You can see it in their faces, in the body language. You can see it everywhere, where they just feel light. Can we take just a 5-second pause?
Mhm. Of course.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.